Okay, greetings to you all. We are going to be looking at chapter 2, which is mainly focusing on project selection through strategic alignment. I'm also using the notes that are prepared for use together with your prescribed textbook. So please note that as you study or as you view this video, you should also ought to study it together with your textbook. Outcomes of the chapter, basically, by the end of the chapter, you ought to be in a position to reflect upon the importance of organizational strategy in the project environment. You also ought to be in a position to discuss the strategic direction of the organization or how the strategic direction of an organization can influence how it selects projects. You should be in a position to discuss some of the project selection methods that are available, both monetary selection methods and non-monetary selection methods. You should also be in a position to describe the relationship between strategy and project selection, and obviously to explain how prioritizing projects has an impact on project selection. And also to explain the benefits of strategically aligning a project to ensure that a project does not pursue its own objectives that are not in line with the overall objectives of the organization. Coming back to project selection through strategic alignment, because there are many other criteria that can be used to select projects. It is always important to realize that strategy is fundamental in deciding how an organization will gain a competitive advantage. Strategy can be translated into organizational strategy, which is specific to any given organization. So we are saying strategy is important in deciding how an organization will become better than all its competitors, than organizations that are operating within the same space with that particular organization, within when also how they can become better than those other organizations that may be offering the same products or the same services with them. So as an organization, how can you actually deliver on projects better than anyone else in the industry who may be able to do it? What makes you do it cost effectively? What makes you do it in less time? What makes you also do it without wasting resources? So there are different sources of competitive advantage that may be available to organizations. Organizational strategy refers to what goals the organization wishes to achieve and how they can achieve such goals. And it is also important to realize that in order to achieve organizational goals, organizations need to be mindful of their internal and external environment that will affect the organization on a daily basis, which is known as the business environment. So if you can go back to your early days when you started this program, I'm sure you remember that you also looked at a chapter where you focused on the business environment. There are both internal factors, there are also external factors. Internal factors are basically those factors within the micro environment and the market environment. Actually, within the micro environment, those are the internal factors. Because once we move to the market environment and macro environment, that becomes the external environment, and the organization does not have control over factors within the market environment as well as the macro environment. However, if an organization is big enough, they may be able to influence some of the factors within the market environment. And it is in the market environment that we also ought to have that competitive advantage. But the actual source of competitive advantage stems from our own internal environment. The stuff that we have, the resources that we have, those may be sources of competitive advantage. In the internal environment, we mainly focus on the weaknesses of the organization and how we can improve on those so that we will capitalize and gain competitive advantage. We also look at the strengths of the organization and capitalize on those strengths to be far better than our competitors. However, in the external environment, that is the market environment and the macro environment, we mainly look at the threats so that we will realize how we can deal with those threats to minimize chances of failure for the organization and also to minimize disruptions in our projects. We also look at opportunities so that we can capitalize on them and become far better than our competitors. So the business environment is key. The business environment is important. As project managers, we ought to have a clear understanding of the business environment. One of the central themes in strategic management literature is the alignment of strategic priorities of the organization, so that they are also aligned. Those strategic priorities should be aligned with what actually transpires in the organization. So if it has been set at the top, it also has to be aligned with what happens at middle level management, what also happens at lower level management. So there is need for strategic alignment in organizations to ensure that all units or all departments or all functions in the organization are still pursuing the same strategy that was set by the organization, are still pursuing the projects in a manner as set by the organization. The concept of strategy has dominated the human vocabulary since ancient times and has been documented in the Art of War, which dates back to 500 BC. This concept of strategy has been adopted from the military and further adopted for use in business. So today in business studies, in business management, business economics, and all other related management and business sciences, we speak of strategy as a way to gain a competitive advantage, but it has its source in the military or in the military. Until now, strategy is viewed as a vital element of managerial activity. You cannot be a manager who does not set goals. You cannot be a manager who do not understand how goals ought to be interpreted, how goals ought to be broken down into smaller plans so that they can be achieved. In business, the same as in the military, strategy bridges the gap between policy and the tactics that will then be used. So once there is a strategy, there also have to be plans that are also developed to achieve that strategy. So there's need for tactics. Those with basic understanding of management will also understand that at top level management, we speak of strategic objectives. At middle level management, those strategic objectives are broken down into achievable goals, which are sometimes known as tactical goals, which are further broken down into operational goals at floor level or at lower level management and workers. So those tactics that we're speaking of assist also in achieving a strategy. Some may still want to know what strategic management is. It is a process whereby all organizational resources and functions are integrated so as to implement strategies which take the business environment into account. As we said, the business environment is key. It cannot be ignored. And this is done for the ultimate goal of achieving long-term organizational objectives. This is done in an effort to gain competitive advantage, to be better than your competitors. The word strategy has so many meanings itself, and all these meanings are useful, important and relevant to the people who are setting strategy for their respective organizations and corporations. If you refer to your textbook, Table 2.1 offers selected definitions that illustrate the complexity of the context of this concept of strategy. But in simple terms, strategy is a choice that an organization decides on in order to respond to the changes in the external environment by utilizing and allocating scarce resources of the organization to improve its competitive advantage. So strategies, that choice that an organization makes to respond to both threats and opportunities that arise in the external environment. And this is done by allocating or by carefully deploying scarce resources. I'm sure you also understand the concept of scarcity, that resources are limited. So choices have to be made when utilizing resources. So when allocating those scarce resources, it should be done in a way that will also improve productivity in the organization and also improve competitive position of the organization. You should do it in a manner that at the end of the day, you emerge the leaders in that particular industry. You emerge at the top in that particular industry. Actually, everyone in this industry that you will be operating in, their agenda is to be the leaders. That is, if you read their visions, if you read their missions, they want to be leaders. They want to be at the top. So you should also have the same mind, put your effort to it, put your mind to it, to ensure that the organization emerges at the top. These are some of the selected definitions of strategy from different sources, which I think you will find time to also go through. But in the meantime, we have actually defined strategy as a choice that an organization decides on in order to respond to changes in the external environment by utilizing and allocating scarce resources of the organization to improve its competitive advantage. And strategic management is basically a process. So these, you will go through them, please, when you find time. The significance of strategy, the importance of strategy. There's a significant amount of literature on organizational strategy, strategic thinking, and strategic management. And the word strategy has become a lifeline for whatever the organization wishes to engage in. Some may still wonder why should there be that emphasis on strategy? And why a strategy becomes so important to organizations' very existence. Because some may think that, no, we should focus on improving the operations. We should just focus on improving human resources. We should just focus on improving the financial management of the organization. Why focus on strategy? But every manager should have a holistic view of the organization, not only to see an organization as separate units, but you should also see an organization as one unit. Because what transpires in one function actually has an effect on the entire organization. For instance, if you have a weak human resources function and all the other functions are working on well, the organization will still suffer. If you have a weak financial management function, and even if all the other functions are working on well, and there is lack of strategy in the organization, that organization will still suffer. So not only does strategy provide the organization with guidance in order to achieve its goals and to sustain a competitive advantage over its competitors, but strategy also involves a comprehensive collection of ongoing strategic management activities and processes that organizations use to systematically coordinate and align resources and actions with the mission, vision, and strategy throughout the organization. Throughout the organization. That is in all functions, in all units, in all departments. There is still need for that holistic view of the organization. Someone somewhere should have a holistic view of the organization, not to only think of one particular project that they are managing, or one particular unit that they are managing, or one particular function that they are managing. Someone somewhere in the organization should have a holistic view of the organization itself. Benefits of strategically aligning a project. In traditional project management approaches, projects are viewed as independent entities which are carefully overseen by the project manager. Although this provides the project manager with a great deal of flexibility to drive the project wherever he or she desires it to go, it also presents the risk of deviating from the overall aims and goals of the organization as a whole. In order to prevent the risk of deviating from the overall aims and goals of the organization, project managers are now seeing the benefits of aligning projects with organizational strategy. So it is of benefit, so that you will not deviate from the overall goals of the organization, but you should be aligned. Coming to project selection, this is the criteria that is used to make informed decisions about the viability of a proposed project. So it's not about just hearing that there's a project that you can run and then you say, yes, it's a good project, let's run with it. No. Minds ought to be applied. People ought to think, people ought to evaluate the viability of such projects. Otherwise, if you adopt any project as it is presented, definitely organizations will suffer. So there is need to evaluate projects. There is need to make informed decisions about their viability. Do they work? Are they of value to the organization? Do they add value to the organization? Are they worthy pursuing? In most instances, an organization will have to select a specific project or a few projects from others to embark on. But with so many projects to choose from, how do organizations begin to select the right ones? So there may be instances where there are more projects, but resources are limited. And as organizations, we can only do so much. You cannot say simply because we have 20 projects that have been presented to us, we can embark on all of them when you do not have manpower. When you do not have the capacity to run them, that will contribute to serious failure of the organization as a whole. It may seem straightforward that deciding on the right projects will increase the likelihood of the project success as well as the success of the organization as a whole. It is therefore logical to spend enough time on selecting a specific project from the beginning. However, this needs it needs to be stressed that even when selecting the right project at the right time, it does not always ensure project success, as projects may still fail due to unforeseen circumstances. So top-level managers and project managers in the organization can still select a right project at the right time, even with the right resources. But there may be other circumstances that may still contribute to project failure. However, that does not mean it's not important to select the right project. Project selection process starts with all potential projects having to go through a rigorous, repeatable, and appropriate selection process. In some cases, there will be exceptions, which is normal. In the normal course of business, there may be some emergence or legislative compliance procedures that must be done that meet none of the criteria that will have been set by the organization. For example, if there's a need for an operational emergence, that will entail the damage to infrastructure as a result of natural disaster. It means people may not really need to decide on whether should we or should we not, how should we choose this over this. There are some projects that the moment they emerge, they have to be attended to. So this is steps that are followed in project selection. First being you look at all potential projects, you see which projects aligns with the strategic objectives of the organization. Then you apply both financial and non-financial criteria to select those projects. Financial criteria, you may look at payback period. Which project will bring back our initial investment earlier than others? You may choose to look at internal rate of return. You may choose to look at net present values, those that did financial management. I'm sure you are familiar with those three common methods that are used to evaluate projects. However, there are also other non-financial criteria that may be applied. So we apply both financial criteria and non-financial criteria to choose the right projects to pursue. Then once a project has been approved, it will then be added to a portfolio of projects and be pursued by the organization. So you can read further on this and start further on this. It's depicted on figure 2.1 in your textbook. So this is basically explaining that you can review the strategic alignment filter, which we looked at here. So that's what is basically explained to say the initial step is basically to verify whether the project can help the organization to achieve its goals. If it does not, then the organization should reject it. Then the financial criteria that will be used or that can be used includes the payback period. And it's explained that it's a basic or a simple calculation of how long will it take to earn back the initial investment the organization has made in a specific project. But there are also other financial criteria that can be used, including the net present value, which is also explained. That it is actual net present value is actually considered the widely used of all different financial models in project selection. It helps to determine the present value of all future cash flows and also the future value. It's also important for organizations to know the future value of present cash flows. Then we also have the internal rate of return, which is the rate of return an organization expects to earn from a particular project it is considered to be the expected growth for the project. So these are financial criteria that are applied in an organization. But there are also other criteria that may be applied, which are non-financial, whereby they will come up with a criteria which is non-financial, and they score each project when they are still in the selection process. Prioritizing projects, as we said, you cannot embark on all projects in as much as you may want to. There's need to choose, there's need to prioritize. So in most instances, an organization may have several projects that pass through the selection process that are seen as viable. However, the organization may not have the resources to pursue all projects. It is therefore important to rank the projects in order to determine which projects are deemed more important for the organization so that they can pursue those first. So basically, that's the process of prioritizing. Some view it as subjective, but it's an important process in the organization. So we move on to the summary, which is basically the conclusion of this chapter. And we should understand that it is important to understand that strategy is a lifeline supporting every action that an organization embarks on, and by extension, the projects will pursue. Therefore, every organization has a unique set of goals and objectives. This is common, that it strives to achieve in order to sustain or even to gain a competitive advantage over its competitors. It is therefore important that organizations' choice of projects is aligned to the goals of the organization, and this can only be achieved if the projects undergo a rigorous selection process to ensure that you don't take all projects as they come, but there is some selection that goes on, there is some thinking that goes on, there is some criteria applied also to see if those actually are aligned with the overall objectives of the organization. So with that, thank you for following this particular presentation. We will be uploading also the one for chapter 3. Thank you.